In theory, this bad boy will start right up. Oh my gosh, it did. Look out!
Ah, yeah. Woo!
2006, for probably any year, Chevy HHR. 2.2 or 2.4 liter, doesn't matter. Doing this because I originally had water in the oil, and that's that engine right there. Couldn't figure out what the heck it was. I pulled the cylinder head off, changed the head gasket after 205,000 miles, changed it out, and it went another 2,000 before it had the same problem, even worse. So I went ahead and pulled it out, pulled the head off. I put water straight into the water jackets here, and it just ran right out of the oil pan. So I'm pretty sure this block is toast. And good motor, went 200,000 miles, changing the oil when the computer said it was time, when it got down to about 15 or 20%. I bought a rebuild engine. I'm not going to say who from, but they've been pretty good so far, except dealing with the issue. I had no oil pressure with this thing. The scary part is I didn't have a light inside telling me. I just had the racket that this thing makes with no oil pressure. And I pulled, I don't have it out now, but I pulled after it being running about 15-20 minutes, I pulled the oil filter cap, and of course the oil filter's in there, and it was just as dry as a bone. There's no oil circulating whatsoever. I had pulled the valve cover, and it was just bone dry. So we've got no oil circulation, so now I'm pulling it out to send it back. They've been pretty good about responding, keeping in touch, and whatnot. So it's coming out again today, and it's going out on Monday. So what I've done here, I've already got the intake off. Most of the cables go around the front of this thing, so I have labeled every cable with tape and where it goes on the engine. That is an excellent idea. It really makes putting it back together so much easier, faster, and there's no guesswork as to where everything goes. And typically, if you've put everything back where it's supposed to go, you just have a start up and check for leaks, and there's no issues and everything works good. This engine, when I got it, had gave like 3 codes right off the bat. One, which was my fault because I failed to label or actually install this hose that I can't remember what it goes to, but it goes on the intake manifold, and that's a huge vacuum leak if you don't get that on. So I took care of that, no problem. And then it had 2 other codes for the intake and exhaust camshaft timing, which was out of whack. So I had to pull the timing cover, reset all of that with the timing chain, and then put it all back together, and the codes went away, but still had the hell of a racket from no oil pressure, and that's an ugly sound. So it's coming out. All the cables are labeled with tape. And it's written on there, like this one goes to the mass airflow sensor on the air cleaner. So I just abbreviated that. And I also have just a very small box of bolts that I've labeled what's in here: crank position sensor and starter for this bag. And sorry for the camera work, I don't do this. Everything's labeled where it goes. Very, very handy when you're putting things back together. I mean, it's easy to take stuff apart. A lot harder to put it back together and actually work right. So save yourself some time, label everything, this cable in the back here gets labeled where everything goes. At one time I actually put this thing back together and I had this cable and this cable switched around. One goes to the fuel injectors, maybe it wasn't this one, and this one goes to the throttle body. I had the throttle body and the fuel injector cable switched around, which this will do. They're the same. So don't count on the principle of, oh, the cables only fit one place, because on this car that's not the case. You can get these two switched, and that really makes the computer act weird, and you got to take it to somebody with a scan tool that can not reset the codes, but there's some other function that my scan tool won't do. Anyway, so don't do that. Definitely. Matter of fact, I marked this one with white, and I also marked the throttle body, so I know those two go together for in case that ever happened again. So it doesn't happen again. When I got this engine, these things are supposed to be rebuilt. Completely gone through, cleaned, everything measured, inspected, all new parts put in, all that good stuff. Except for this one came, I doubt you can see it. Anyway, down here is dirt that I scraped off. You can kind of see it here that they painted over the whole thing, and they painted over some muddy engine grime, which means they didn't clean the block. So this whole rebuild has been suspect from day one. So I've been extra careful. Another issue with these HHR motors, or 2.4 Ecotechs, is the timing chain tensioner, which is in the back here. Very, very important. I believe those things break once in a while, so I replaced it with a new one. This is the old one, and you can tell it's the old one because you can still see the pitted rust in the top of this thing. So this has not been replaced. They just kept the old crappy one that came with it. And the spring inside of these things breaks, and then of course it doesn't provide chain tension, and your chain ends up skipping a tooth or breaking, and you have valves hitting pistons inside because it's an interference motor where you don't want any interference. The new engine has arrived. Here it is. Depending on how this install goes, I might go ahead and name who did this part, who did the rebuild on this engine anyway. This is a note that came with it. This is important for the timing chain tensioner, which is right here on these engines, so that it'll extend and create tension on the timing chain when you turn it, as designed. Alright, this is good that they've taped up. They've taken some care to tape things up. In contrast to how I got this engine before, the block has been actually cleaned. It's been through a power washer. I forget what they call those. That's a indication tag, E-Pro, void if removed. Different, just lets them know that it's their engine. This is the problem I had originally. I ordered this engine without an oil cooler, and they used a block that came equipped with an oil cooler, which put this port in and this port, which the non-oil cooler block actually does not have this. So they've got this shaft, and the guys have marked which way the oil flows, coming this way through this shaft into the oil cooler, which is here, through the oil cooler and back into the oil filter housing in this direction. Seems to me like we could just take this out and plug these up and not have to worry about it. But if you don't, and you put a plug here, no oil gets here, and then you have the problem that I had in video part 1. Otherwise, they've taken some care to tape these off, which is good, and it doesn't look like they've painted over all of the bolt holes. Some of them look like they've scraped off the paint where you're going to put your gasket seal here. The holes look like they've all been chased with a thread chaser, which is wonderful. It gets the paint out. And you see evidence of sealant here, and I think this is part of the block. That's probably factory, but this is where the oil pan goes on. And generally this looks good. This head looks like it might be different, or they just didn't paint it with the same stuff that's on the block. When I originally got this, the whole thing was painted all one color. Anyway, it's now ready to go for install. I got to put the water transfer, coolant transfer tube here and the thermostat housing here before I actually install this and get as much on it as I can before I put it in. Because this is the back side of the engine by the firewall, and it's really difficult to get to. If you got to change this water pump, you got to do it from underneath. So anyway, I'll let you guys know how that goes. Thanks and have a great day. Okay, I'm getting ready to put oil in the motor. It's installed. Everything is connected. There is coolant. I don't know if you can see it. There's coolant in there. In the radiator, it's full. I'm about to put the oil in. Here, oil filter. That's I'm gonna put some down in there this time as well, just in case. Oil is in, 5 quarts. I even put some down the reservoir for the oil filter. I don't know if that does any good or not. Coolant, I showed you, leaving this cap up here just to remind me, because we'll be burping the coolant system. You gotta let it run for a little bit with the heater set to heat, and that'll help get all the air out of the system, and it comes out of there. So here we go. Let's see what happens. In theory, this bad boy will start right up. A lot of miles. Oh my gosh, it did. That's probably a code from previous encounter. If you like this video, hit the subscribe button. Clear that. My scan tool. Otherwise, it sounds nice. Just heat. Don't necessarily have. I'll just put it on low and get that open. Let the coolant circulate through there. So far, so good. Sounds a whole lot better than it did before. And I have no leaks. It's wonderful. Actually sounds really nice. Quiet. Okay, I'll be letting this thing run for a little bit, getting up the temperature, and adding coolant as required. So far, so good. Could be a little bit of smoke back there for grease, oil, and paint, whatever, burning off the back. That is not a big concern at all. It sounds nice. Sounds very nice. Alright, signing off.